The basic premise of Frozen is it's the reversal of the setup of the Snow Queen by Hans Christian Andersen. In the Snow Queen, there's a devil's mirror that breaks and distorts everyone's perceptions, making them see things in some ways as far away from the actual truth as they can possibly get. In the Snow Queen, you're on the outside, looking in as a reader, knowing that this is happening. In Frozen, you're placed inside the deception, which means that you are placed in this broken mirror view of the universe. Something set up to make you see the world, to sympathize with and empathize with, if that's even possible, narcissistic, psychopathic, self-centered people. This cosmology is one in which everything revolves around the manipulators. And if you view it in that perspective, then you become subject to one of their deceptions, which is that a narcissist's love of having other people perceive him or her as being unique. And in this, it is conceiving them as being the only ones with magical powers, even though they live in a universe where magic is quite readily available to everybody. In the original Snow Queen story, there are multiple spellcasters. And even in Frozen itself, anybody can go and dig up a chunk of ice with magic stored in it if they want to. Similarly, in Tangled, anyone could have gone and sung to the flower. They all seem to know generally where it is when they're sent out to search for it. But only a few people do, apparently. At least those are the ones the story is about. And when they give birth to these magically influenced children, they seem to be blonde, blue-eyed, left-handed, and having powers. If you look at things from Elsa's perspective, the number one narcissistic character, then you want to think she's the only one of her kind. Or that if there is another one, that one must be her twin. When in fact, I believe that Rapunzel and Elsa are part of a cosmological system in which they all use magic, but it manifests in opposite ways. Anna's also part of this. She throws a snowball at Marshmallow with her left hand, and she's listed in the Disney Wiki as having strawberry blonde hair. And if you check my other videos, I think there's good evidence that she employs magic, so she is part of the overall system. This can be thought of as starting from the 9th level of Dante's Circle of Hell, a concentric system of smaller circles with the devil right at the middle, and he is bound there, you could say, tied up or tangled, and he's also in a very cold place. It's frozen. There you have the titles of both movies. If you move up from there in this Ptolemaic medieval conception of how the cosmos works, rotating around a central focus, the next level is Earth. That's the element associated with the season of fall, with salt, with sensuality, and I think with Anna, because of the fall colors, partial fall colors in her hair, like the way leaves would turn and crops would ripen. She has some possible earth powers in that she can make herself very hard so that things shatter against her. But that may also be a fire power in that the Nemean lion, the symbol of the zodiac sign Leo, has an impenetrable hide. So it's hard to tell her earth powers from her fire powers. This is the opposite of Elsa. When you move up into the water sphere, which is the next one of the terrestrial spheres, you have Earth at the center and then water surrounding it. Then we get to the element associated with the season of winter. And in Elsa's hair, you can see this represented in that winter's a season of whiteness, and her hair is partially white as death. But winter's also something that's symbolic of Mercury, the starting point for making other metals with alchemy. So it's a system, it's an element associated with base materials. And the things Elsa could do with water powers are things like making ice shields and ice spears and so on. Now this water element, one of the ones that's alluded to in the beginning of Frozen, born of cold winter air and mountain rain combining, is part of her overall system of powers, which many have remarked clash with each other. And I think that is because they are astrologically incompatible. Water and air signs in the zodiac, if you try to make couples out of them, don't tend to get together, along. They don't match. Whereas fire and air, there are some cases where those will make comfortable pairings. Air is the element associated with the season of spring. and with the ability to breathe the breath of life into something, the ability to animate things, possibly a nice little play on the fact that the movie is animated and the animators like to play games and showing the natural world doing whatever whim Elsa follows at the moment when she sings her songs. It's also, a spring would be when the time earliest in life when people would tend to have the palest shade to blonde hair. If they have it, sometimes people as they mature lose their blondness as they symbolically go through the seasons of summer and into fall, or when crops will ripen as they're ready to be harvested and so on. This season and element association also has to do with wind. Spring can be a very windy time. It's air is the element you move, of course, to create wind, and it's associated with controlling of weather, which is another thing that Elsa does. I should note, though, that normally it would be part of a 4-season cycle, and when Elsa animates something, it's not something available to grow into something which can be harvested in the fall, the season of Anna. It's just an animated snowman. The next thing up is fire in this 4-element system, and that is associated, of course, with the season of summer, and it's with transmutation in general, and the element which itself is associated with combustion and transmutation, which is sulfur, because alchemists would start with mercury and they'd take sulfur and they'd try to make other metals out of it. And this also shows up in Snow White. Snow White is also an alchemical story, symbolic of spiritual alchemical transformation, beginning with the colors white, red, and black, because base metals, you'd go start with something black and then it would go through a white and red stage and finally to gold. This is the next stage up. After we pass the earth, air, water, fire, and we get past the berserker powers, the fire and ice powers, where someone can move so fast that everybody seems to be moving like a glacier in comparison, which is displayed by Anna, and also Anna's potential possibility of thawing herself out. Then we get to the celestial spheres outside the Earth, and these are the ones that house the 7 planets associated with the 7 elements. There's earth, air, water, fire, mercury, sulfur, and the 5th element, the quintessence. This is the one in which the planets reside in this cosmological system. And it is associated with the transmission of light and gravity, much like Rapunzel can make her hair glow. And you could think of her hair as like wires that would connect other things and allow the power, the light and gravity to travel through them. She does seem to have some ways of manipulating gravity in a limited sense because of all the physically impossible ways she uses her hair. Also, the quintessence has to be distilled 7 times to be made. And when you have it, you can use it for making medical elixirs and the philosopher's stone, which can make somebody wealthy, like they have gold, and also bestow eternal youth on them. So symbolically, gold is an element associated with immortality because it doesn't combine with other elements. The symbol of Rapunzel is a yellow sphere with 2 sets of 7, or 1 set of 7, depending on the part of the movie, protrusions around the outside it. And this is much like the model shown in aether, spelled A-E, in the Wikipedia entry, where there's this concentric model of all the elements and planets, and on the outside there's 7 words written around it. Rapunzel comes from a flower with 6 petals, and when you see the flags of Arendelle, when Anna first goes out into the city, there are 2 flags with Elsa and Anna's presumably profiles on them. And then there are also 2 flags with some sort of plant with 3 protrusions sticking up, done twice. And then there's 2 sets of V's, which are much like triangles. And triangles are the symbols of the basic 4 elements from which Anna and Elsa draw their powers. And all these things are opposites of each other. The air and water are opposites of fire and earth, symbolized by Anna, Elsa, the first one. And both of those are opposites of the celestial 5th element because it's heavenly versus earthly. It's not that tough for anybody to get access to these elements. So you don't have to have parents getting a child from only one source and only one magical influence, I don't think. For instance, perhaps, I'm just throwing this out there, going out on a limb, maybe Elsa's mother had a fever before Elsa was about to be born, so they took some of the magic ice and put it on her to cool her down. then next time around, I thought she might be too cold, and you'd have to do the opposite procedure and make Anna magical in the opposite way. The family resemblance between Anna and Elsa is actually quite strong, I think. If you look at their profiles in the view from the final image in the song, Do You Want to Build a Snowman, you can see their noses, particularly the turn of the nose at the end, look very much alike. And there's a Google search you can make, I did anyway, to find the Elsa and Anna's mother versus Rapunzel's mother, and it shows pictures of all their parents and all their kids, and they show Elsa having the same facial feature shape as her mother, Rapunzel having the facial features of her mother, and Anna resembling her father. So the parents do seem to set up the way they should, and the film theorists thought that because Anna and Elsa's father hesitated when asked where Elsa's powers had come from, whether she was born or cursed with them, that he must not have known how she got them. But even someone who knew would hesitate that way. If you asked Rapunzel's parents, was she born or cursed with the powers, they would think, well, she was born with them, but we magically infused her with something just before, so that could be considered a curse, especially since she was stolen just afterwards. So anybody treated with magic just before birth could be considered as either born or cursed with the power. So I think that's what I wanted to cover, and the overall system with all these left-handed people could be symbolized by somebody as part of a cosmologic, self-centered, satanic system of people following the magical left-hand path to personal transformation through alchemy.